All right, so one thing I am going to do is actually do this in functional-based components. So the code that you have is in class-based. For the most part, it should look pretty similar, but there will be a few exceptions, especially when we get into the lifecycle methods. That's going to be, we're going to use effects instead of using component did mount, but we'll get to that. So again, I know we wanted some focus on functional components, so I think this is a good opportunity to do so. If you're not comfortable with it, you can definitely just copy the code that we have presented. Again, this is in class-based components, but I would like to do functional-based components. All right, so we installed React. Let's clear this. And what else do we need to do? So let's get our server running and just see what we have. So npm start. Hopefully I don't have another server running. Looks like I already do. Let me quickly find that. Actually, I'm not sure what's running here. So my API here. That's, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, sorry, I think that was it. Let's try that again. Okay, sorry, I had another project running. All right, so we're going to our React front end. We should see that fancy graphic here, hopefully. There we go. All right, so this is the shipped React page, but we want to add our own functionality. So I'm going to go to my source. Where is this? This is in app.js. Let's get rid of all this stuff. We don't need that logo anymore. And I'm just going to delete that logo from my file list because I don't want it there. All right, so let's add a home page. So I'm going to actually just do this here. I'm not going to copy code, and we'll go back there if I forget anything. So let's install a few items. So I guess I will go back here. We want to install React Router DOM, React Bootstrap. Again, this React Bootstrap table I was not able to install, so I'm actually going to skip that step, and we'll kind of replace it. So React Router DOM, let's do its thing, and do Bootstrap.
Really quick, Ankur, are you going to use functional components just like to give examples and stuff? Okay.
So yeah, the default default React app already is in functional components. So I'm just going to stick with that, and also just to get more experience with functional components. All right, so we installed React Bootstrap and React Router DOM. Let's just try installing this. Again, I ran into errors. I don't know if I was doing anything wrong. Let's just see what happens. So I'm going to try to install React. All right, so we got some errors. Again, I don't know if you guys will encounter these errors, but it looks like, whatever version of React Bootstrap table exists can only support React 15 or React 16. But if we go to our package.json, notice that our React version is 17. So there's a couple ways we could remedy this. We could maybe downgrade our React version. So instead of making it 17, we could go back down to a 16 version. I'm not too comfortable with that. I'd rather use the latest and greatest and not opt not to use that table. So again, if you do want to try to use that, you could try to mess with your versions and see if you can install it. But I'm not going to go about that. So we'll skip that step and just do our npm install. Okay, so that's all done. Now we want to create our pages. So we're going to create a home page and a wine page. So I'm going to do that over here. That's not what I want. Create a pages subdirectory, and in that we want to create, let's say, homepage.js, and let's get cracking on that. So I have a snippet that I use, so I'm going to just use that here. But again, this is the bare bones structure of a functional component. We have function and then a component name. So in this case, I'll call it homepage. We will take in props. Again, our parent might not be passing in props, but this is where you want to pass in the props to your functional component. And then we just want to return some JSX elements. All right, and then don't forget your export. I obviously often forget that, so my snippet kind of does that for me automatically. But here, let's just write something very basic. Let's say wine list. And if I refresh this, my home page. So let's go. So import homepage from pages slash homepage. All right, and then I'm just going to add a homepage component here. All right, there we go. Wine list, nothing too exciting there. I think one step that I skipped over was adding this router. So let me quickly do that. So I'm going to copy. And we want a router. So browser, router. Nest this in here. I'm going to add one route. Route and component will be that homepage. I need a path. So that'll be our base. I guess I should copy this part too. All right, so these are our routes. So if we go to wine/wine ID, we'll get a wine detail page. So that'll be the wine page that we're going to create still. /wine page. All right, so we have a route set up. Hopefully that didn't break anything. Let's verify that. Yeah, that doesn't exist. That's fine. All right, let's go to our home page. All right, wine list. Let's create our wine page so that React server isn't plain. We'll do wine page.js, and this will be basically the same thing. All right, and then let's add a h2 that says wine page. Okay, there we go. So we have a wine list. If we go to some wine, let's go to wine 1. All right, here we go, wine detail page. Obviously, we have nothing to show right now. We're not fetching any data. We're just going to some pages. So again, go to any wine number, it's going to be wine detail page. Okay, let's proceed. Homepage. So let's actually get some data here. So this is where we ideally wanted to use, I think, let's see. Yep, so we tested it. We get to our endpoints. Now, I think we wanted to use this bootstrap table item, but that's something that we didn't solve. So I'm actually going to try something else. We can go to React table. All right. And then let's see how we can do this. So we're going to create a table, something similar to this. So again, if you ever did like HTML development back in the 90s, you probably got familiar with tables because that was probably pretty much the only way to kind of lay out items. We didn't have, Fluxbox or grid through CSS. So, TR stands for table row, TD stands for table data. Again, this is something you're probably familiar with if you created tables on HTML pages. This isn't done as much these days because we have, I guess easier and better ways to display data. But table still exists, so let's try to use it. So copy this over. We're in our wine list. We're going to display this in our table. All right, so table, we're going to need a table head. So these are our header row. We're going to have a row there, and then we're going to have some data items. So let's see. We want wine. Let's show our wine ID. Let's show our wine name. What else do we have? We have price, varietal. Hopefully I spelled that correctly. And what else do we have? Description, I believe. Okay, so hopefully those are my fields. Want to see what this looks like. Let's go back to homepage. Table not defined. That's because I need to include it. Go import table from React Bootstrap. How's that look? There we go. So we got our headers here, nothing too exciting. To notice that we are using that table element, but we don't really have the styling that I was promised, right? So my table should look something more like this. Obviously, we don't have these records. If we want to put in a dummy record quickly, let's do that. So here I'm going to have table body, and it's going to look very similar. We're going to have a row, and let's just, again, put in some dummy data. So let's say ID is 1, name is lemonade, price would be $7.99. All right, so let's see. All right, there we go. So again, our table doesn't look like what we expected to. And the reason being is Bootstrap relies on styling, and you need to include that styling in your project. So if I go to getting started, again, they go through if you want to install it and some other things. The thing I'm interested in is in style sheets. So this is where the styling will come from my page. There's two ways I could do it. I can import the CSS into my JavaScript, or I'm just going to copy this link, which actually links the style sheet. And this is what they recommend. So you are linking to the latest styles. So I'm going to copy, again, this link tag, go back to my project. I'm going to go to my public folder. And here there's an index.html. I'm just going to drop this into the head section of this HTML page. So let's just put that right here, I guess. Add that out a bit. All right, if I save that, let's refresh my page. And I've crashed my circle. That's not good. What happened? I'm not sure what happened. Start that up again. Okay, hopefully it's up now. Loading, it's doing something, it's doing something. All right, there we go. So now we got our nice table. I'm not sure why our React server crashed. I think that might happen occasionally. But now we have the styling that we kind of was promised from React Bootstrap. All right, so that's kind of cool. All right, so we have our homepage templated out. Our wine page might be just basic details. I'll do that later. The thing we need to do now is actually give our front end some functionality, and that's going to be done through hooking up with our Django backend. So I've actually put up my Django project on Heroku so that I can access it if I kind of want to spy on that. So here's my project so far. I have this blah CP November wine API project. Let me actually open that up and we could take a look at it. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have used Heroku enough, but Heroku can be slow. Like notice I'm waiting here for maybe like 5 seconds for this to come up, maybe 10 seconds. It's sure taking its time. So that's one of the drawbacks of Heroku, at least the free account. But again, it at least gives you something to play around with. So if we go to wines, all right, so I have 2 wines listed right here. If I wanted to add more wines, I could, but notice this is on Heroku, this is not on my local host. So let's hook that up. So I'm going to create a new folder. Let's call that API. In that folder, I'm going to create wine API.js. And this we're going to use fetch to get our data. Hopefully you guys are familiar with fetch. So let's create a function here. Let's say fetch all wines. And I'm going to have another one that's going to be function. Any questions so far? I know I'm kind of just coding on screen, not too exciting. Okay, so these are our stubbed out functions. Let's not forget to export them because I usually do. So let's just say exports, fetch, and fetch. Okay, so let's give this functionality. Let's do our fetch all lines. So I'm going to make this an async function. So to do that, dropping in, dropping in an async keyword before my function. Now I could use await in here. So let's do let response equals await, and we're going to do a fetch to some URL, and then we're going to get some data from response.json. That's also asynchronous, so we're going to have to do an await there. And then once this function has done all of its work, it can return the data because we waited on the promises resolve here. Okay, we got to figure out our URL. So that's going to be the Heroku site. So let's do let's face URL equal, what was my path here? So I had blah cp, copy that over. However,
hey Ankur.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I know you've talked about this before, but with the async, is the fetch all wines function specifically, is that where you would want to use a try catch, or is it just kind of, would that be?
Nope. I 100% agree with your suggestion or question. I should be using try catch for sure. Because my fetch, again, if this is a bad request or whatever, can fail, and then I'm going to want to handle it gracefully. So yeah, you should always be using try catch. Thank you for reminding me here. So let's return some object here that has an error property, and then we'll just say fetch failed. Say error. Simple. Right. So yeah, in this case, we're just going to return some object that has an error field, so we can actually check that. So whoever's calling fetch all wine should check if an error field exists. If it does, then they will know that an error occurred instead of getting the correct data, and they can handle it the way they want. So thank you, Taylor, for that suggestion. I was definitely going to forget that, so let's add that here also. Actually, I'm not going to add it here. We'll see why. Okay, so fetch all wines, I need my URL, so that's going to be my base URL. But if we read on our curriculum page, there's a caveat to making this request. So where's this? We're going to need to use modify URL to call cores anywhere for Heroku. So there's this prefix. This basically allows us to make a request without our API actually being aware that we're requesting data from a different URL. We can get around this if we actually whitelist, requesters, but currently we're not going to do that step. So I'm going to add this prefix to whatever my actual project URL is. So that will be dropped in here. Okay, and then I think that's all we need, but we should definitely test this. So fetch all wines, that's going to be used on our homepage. So here we're going to need to render that stuff. So let's do function render. Come on, there we go. Wine list. And this will basically substitute what we have here. So instead of having made up data, we'll actually have some data. So this will be render wine list. All right, so it's going to look something like this. But not quite. All right, so this is where we're going to want to, in our function component, we need to retrieve the data and then use the data to render it. So I'm going to have something called wine list. So this will actually be a state that I need to create. So I'm going to do const wine list and then setter for it, wine list, that I'm probably not going to use. Actually, I will probably use it at some point. So use state. Again, this is our functional component. So we use something called use state. Instead of having instance attributes in a class, we have to use state. So let's make that an empty list to start off with. Use state, it comes from React, so I do need to import that. Import use state from React. All right, so now we have the state we can use. So let's assume that we have the data, and I'm just going to render it, and then we'll do the hard part of actually fetching the data. So here I need to, let's see, let's create table data. All right, if you guys remember the map function, this comes in really handy here. So basically, I'm going to go through my entire wine list. For each of those items, I'm going to convert it to, I'm going to create a new list. I guess it should be array because we're in JavaScript, but I guess I'm sticking to Python terminology. So I'm going to convert it to a JSX element. So this will take in an item and an index. That's going to map to my function here. All right, hopefully you guys following along. If not, please ask questions. And this will ultimately return our table data. Okay, so we're assuming that we retrieve our data. We're gonna use map on that, and then for each item, we're gonna create this table row object and push that into our table data elements. So let's return this good stuff. And instead of this data, we want actual data. So it's going to be item. Let's call this wine. All right, so for each wine, we have an ID. Then we want a wine name. Each wine has a price. Wine.varietal. And finally, a description. Okay, so index, I'm not sure if I need a key here, but we'll do it anyway. All right, I think that should be all I need. But we gotta do the hard part. So let's go back to our curriculum page and kind of compare the methods. So we created part of our API. We still need to do fetch wines. Let's go to our homepage. So homepage, again, this is a class-based component in an example. Notice we have class, extends, component. They have a state that they create. Again, this is substituted by what I did here, use state. They create a state in a functional component compared to creating an instance variable or instance attribute in a class. So that's the one comparison there. The second thing is, if you guys remember your lifecycle methods, component did mount is a method that gets triggered or called by React automatically after the very first render of your component. But we can't use component did mount in a functional component. So basically, we had to take this idea and convert it to a functional approach. So to do that, we need to use another magic hook called use effect. So use effect also comes from React. So let's make sure we don't forget to import that. Use effect. And then use effects will be used here to make our fetch call. So again, we normally want to make our initial API calls in component did mount, or basically after the first render. So that's what we're going to achieve here with our use effect. All right, our dependency list is just going to be an empty list. Again, just to kind of remind you guys, if you have an empty list dependency, this use effect will basically act as your component did mount. If you add maybe like wine list here, then this use effect is going to be both your component did mount behavior and your component did update behavior for whenever wine list is updated. In this case, I don't want to do that here. I just want to do a fetch request here. So this this use effect is going to do a fetch request after the first render. That's, again, the point of this empty list. All right. So again, I'm trying to mimic this behavior. Another difference, I guess, that I should point out is they're using .then syntax, because if you look at their fetch wine by ID, fetch wines, they're just returning a promise. So fetch returns a promise, and then the promise will be resolved eventually, versus the way I did it was using async await. So that is a difference in syntax, and it kind of changes your code a little bit. But we'll see both methods. So I use async await for fetch wines. When I implement fetch wine by ID, I will actually use the .then syntax, just to kind of compare and contrast. Normally, you want to be consistent, whether you use async await or .then syntax. But in this case, I just want to show both. Okay, so this use effect needs to do a fetch. So something I learned last week that I wasn't fully aware of. You can't make this async. If you do, you'll get errors. You'll get a warning actually in your output saying that you can't make that async. That can potentially cause some problems. So in that case, I'm going to call a function that says get lines, and that will be my async function. I could just create that function and use effects, but I'd rather break it out in case I want to reuse it. So again, this is going to be async. If I can spell that correctly. There, async get lines. We'll take in no parameters, and this will do a fetch. So let's say let data equal awaits. I got to import my API. So let's do that. Import line API from API slash. Right. So should have access to my fetch methods. Fetch line. Sorry. Line API dot fetch. I'm actually finding it. Line. All right, this makes me think my export didn't work correctly. All right, hopefully it's hooked up correctly. We'll find out. So I have wine API, fetch all wines. So this is, if you take any parameters, should get my data back once it's resolved. And then I want to take that data and I want to update my wine list. So I'm going to do some, but I should check my data. So again, a couple steps here. Note, again, we have this try catch. If there's whatever error happens in fetching the data or processing the JSON, we're going to return this error object. And so we should check if an error object exists. If it does not, then that should mean that we're successful. So that's something I want to check in my caller. So we'll do if not data.error. Then let's actually use our data. So in this case, I'm going to call set wine list. Again, this is from our use state. Set wine list, and we'll just set the data in there. All right, so once our state updates, we'll automatically trigger re-render, and at that point, we should have our wine list ready to go whenever this render method gets called from our re-render. All right, but as always, it's good to make sure this actually works, not assume it works. So fetch all wines, that looks good. Use effects, calls get wines. All right, any questions on use state or use effects? Again, these are hooks that are used in functional components that kind of mimic what you should be able to do in class-based components. Okay, no questions then. Let's kind of scan our page. So we implemented this just in a different way. Doing this. Right, so I guess they created a wine list component. That's something I did not do. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that so we don't get too out of sync with the curriculum page. So let me create a new folder. Let's call that components. In here, we'll create a wine list component. And we'll move a lot of this code into that. So home page, let's see. All right, I guess I could just move this entirely. Copy, paste. That looks good. We just don't need this, I guess. I don't know. I'm not sure if this component has too much use, but good to use components because that's the whole point of React. So my table is gone from here. Sorry, let me just delete all this code that I spent all my time writing up. All right, so again, this is all just going to be replaced with our wine list. So I'm going to import that wine list from let's go to wine list. That's this table. Okay, and I'm going to change this. Let's go to wine list. All right, now look, should be good. Homepage imports wine list, and we use wine list here. So let's Whitelist. All right, let's go to Whitelist, and then this is where we're actually displaying our data. So we're fetching wine, using state, and yeah, I think that should be good. Let's just add some more styling. React Bootstrap. Go back. I actually want to use a darker table, so I'm going to use that variant dark, just because it looks kind of cool. Okay, table homepage. All right, we're not using any of this goodness. All right, so that's gone. We create our homepage, create our wine list. We should be fetching our data and then displaying it, but this is where we should actually test. So we've ran a lot of code. Maybe you should have tested the fetching before we actually wired it up, but hopefully it won't be too much of a hassle if we do get errors. All right, let's go to this track. So this is our table. We should be seeing data here. Let's refresh. All right, so we get some errors, exports. That is my bad. One API. All right, that was one error. Okay, doesn't seem like we're getting data, but Heroku can be slow. But let's investigate. So I'm going to add a breakpoint here. Let's maybe add some console logging. So, all right, if we get an error, let's print it out.
Uncle, are you trying to look at Heroku or your local host?
You mean for my wine API? Yeah, so I am trying to retrieve my data from my Heroku site because that is where my wine API is running. So this is where my wine API lives. So I should be able to get this data. So let's actually test it out. But yeah, I'm requesting it from my local host though.
Okay.
But yeah, again, this is the whole point of debugging. So hopefully you guys enjoy debugging, or at least someone enjoy it. Let's just print out the error if we get an error. Save that. I guess my breakpoint won't be hit right now. That's fine. Bring up my property inspector. Let's see. Want errors? Okay, fail at getting all lines. We got 403. So I think our requests, let's see.
Don't you have to re-push your data to the Heroku since you made changes?
Refresh my data. Could you elaborate?
I guess I feel like I thought if you make changes, you have to update Heroku with your code.
So I've not made changes to my backend. So my React is on my localhost, and yeah, my backend hasn't changed. But I think I did encounter this error yesterday. So it took me maybe a few moments to figure out. Let's actually try to navigate to this URL that I'm trying to go to in my browser. Let's see what happens. So let me just bring up a new tab. Nope, why are you searching? That quote's in there. Let's try that again. Okay, yeah, so I didn't encounter this yesterday, and I think I was able to figure out based on what response I got. So let's wait for this page to come up. All right, so I got this page when I tried to navigate to my Cores Anywhere site manually. I'm gonna, I had to click this button that says request temporary access to the demo server. So you guys might have to do this also. So once I do that, my request should be a little different. All right, so it says you currently have temporary access to the demo server. So again, this is only temporary. We should be actually whitelisting our requester, but in this case, to just get this up and running and testing, we're using this Cores Anywhere URL. So I refresh. Let's try to go back to where I was trying to go to. So I go back to the Wines API. I'm going to get another error if I remember correctly. Yep. So I get this error: missing required request header. Must specify one of origin or X requested with. Again, I don't know too much about why this is required, but just following what they're kind of prompting me to, seems like I need to include an origin in my header. So again, if you remember the fetch API takes a second parameter that's optional. So let's just do let init equal, this can be headers. And within headers, we're going to have an object called origin, and let's just call this localhost. I believe this can be any value you want. You just need to specify some origin here. And make sure my brackets met. All right, so I'm going to pass that as my second parameter. Again, just a simple value of in your headers, you need an origin. And I figured this out based on the message here. That's not something I'm magically new. I did stumble through this yesterday, where I was like, why isn't this working? Tried going to that URL, went through the same process. So hopefully this will save you a couple headaches if you run into the same issue. All right, so now that I have origin here, I pass that into my second parameter for fetch. And then, yeah, let's see if this works. I'm going to refresh here. And will that work? If not, I'm going to go into debug mode and actually step through my code. It's taking its time. This is Heroku being slow. There we go. So I got my data here. So additional couple steps that I did not expect. Again, just we need to go to that, I guess, URL manually, enable the demo server or temporary access to the demo server, and then also add an origin header to your fetch request. All right, so once I did that, I was eventually able to get my data. So I have two records. I have Capri Sun and High C. Again, this is coming from my backend. If I actually want to go to my Heroku website and change that data. So let's, all right, so we have this. Let's actually update my High C. I have this int field, ignore that. That's just a field I added because I was testing something. But let's change, the description of High C. So to do that, I need to go to line/2. All right, so we have our data. Let's actually update it. So let's change it to 199. Or I guess I was going to update my description. So all right, if I put that, all right, notice that stuff updated. I updated my price and my description, but the front end doesn't automatically reload. Like if you did want to add that functionality, we could, think about it. We could maybe add a timer. Maybe that timer could query your Django or whatever your API, wherever your API is, maybe query it every minute or every 5 minutes or every 5 seconds. Again, totally up to you. I mean, it should be sensible. Hopefully this data in the backend isn't updating every 5 seconds. But it makes sense. Maybe update it every hour in case new data was added. In this case, I don't have that functionality. So if I refresh here, it's going to pull that data and should get that update. We could try adding a timer. Actually, that might be something of interest. So I'm actually going to try to wing that. So hopefully it doesn't take too long. But yeah, let's actually punt on that. Let's get our wine detail page, and then if we have time, we'll try adding that timer in so that we can get our data automatically. Again, Heroku is being super slow. I made this request like ages ago, and it's still trying to come in. There we go. All right, so High C is 199. We got our description update, but yep. So we updated our backend and just re-requested the data, and there it is. Any questions on the wine list page? What we did. What we had to do with our fetch request, again, don't forget your origin. And this is just something that the Course Anywhere URL kind of requires. What questions do you guys have?
You could do this without using state, correct?
Without
just mapping out.
In my wine list, correct? Right here.
Yes. Could you technically do that? Just use the fetch request. Use fetch all wines and then map over everything that you get back.
I could, but there's going to be one problem with that. When I get my data, and so React has to know that some update happened. That's the whole point of use state. So if I just get my data and then like render some JSX with it, React is not going to know like, hey, I need to re-render. So when you call set wine list here, that's going to tell React, hey, my internal state changed, and then I need to actually re-render. So the process here is basically we load our component, we do our initial render. So this rendering happens initially. Render wine list does nothing because we don't actually have any wine list data. After the initial render, our use effect gets called. Again, this goes back to our life cycle. So use effect will get called after the initial rerun, after the initial render, and then we'll call get wines after that. Get wines in turn will do this business. So this is going to be async behavior. It's going to call our wine API, fetch all wines, get our data eventually. Again, Heroku takes kind of forever. Once that data is ready, if it's error-free, as in we successfully got our data, we're going to call set state. This is also asynchronous, but this will set our data into our wine list, and that will trigger a re-render. So now React knows that wine list has changed, and so this render will happen again. And then this time around, when we call render wine list, this wine list item will actually have data. So I don't think it would be achievable without state being in there, because that state will tell React, hey, something changed, re-render. Any questions on that item? If you had an alternative, like if you were thinking about something else or got this to work without set state, definitely I'm curious about that. All right, but yeah, so again, that's the whole point of having state. So you have props or state. If either one of those change, then React will automatically re-render your component. And that's kind of the whole point of React. It does the updating for you. You don't have to, you don't have to necessarily, I guess, sorry, Christian, going back to your point, you could technically achieve this without state if you just got your data and then called something called force render, I believe. I'm actually going to have to go back to my lifecycle diagram. So what is it? Lifecycle diagram React diagram. So this is something, again, we investigated maybe a week ago, last Monday. That's not where I want to go. First results. All right, let me pull this up a little bit. All right, so if you guys remember this diagram, there are 3 conditions under which a re-render happens. One is if your parent component updates the props that are being passed down. Second is the set state. So this is what we're doing in our functional component when we call when we use the set wine list. That's actually calling set state, and that's going to force a re-render. The third way to do it is calling force update. So I guess technically, yeah, you could do this without set state if you just got your data, and then when you get your data, you call force update, and that will trigger your re-render. So that is, again, another way to do it. But again, set state is more, I guess, appropriate or the common way to do it. I've never really called force update, and I feel like you shouldn't be kind of doing it that way because you're doing it manually. You want React to kind of do the magic for you. So yeah, I could call force update and make that happen if I wanted to. I'm actually not sure if force update is different in functional components, so let's actually discover that. What are my typos? How to force function component. So actually, I'm not sure if force state exists in. Yeah, I guess force state might not be an option actually in functional components. So maybe I need to take back what I just said. So that's where use state comes in play again. So you want to use state. I don't think force update might not be available here. So let's do force update. Okay, so hopefully, Christian, is that clear on why use state is necessary?
Yes, thank you.
Gotcha. Thanks for asking that question. Okay, so we got our data. I broke it. That's back. All right, let's do our wine detail. And our wine detail is going to be done a little differently. So I'm going to go back to my wine API and implement my fetch wine by ID. But I'm actually not going to make this async. I'm going to use the .then because that's another common way you'll see this written up. And that's what we have in our curriculum page. So kind of scan that. Where is that? Yep, so it's calling fetch and then just returning the promise that fetch returns. So let's kind of mimic that. we're gonna return fetch call. That's gonna be to our base URL plus some additional business. It's gonna be wines and where's this? Wine ID. Okay, let's see here.
I think it's the backslash before the $sign.
Good catch. Forward slash, is that what we want? Yeah, / anyway. Yeah, so we don't want to escape out of that string. That's my bad. All right, so this should append wines wine ID. I don't know if we need the, yeah, I don't think we need the slash here. If we do, we'll add it. All right, so this is going to return a fetch, and then once that data is ready, we call .then. So the response is what we get. We want to take that response and return the process JSON, and that'll be our data. However, if we run into an error, so again, this is similar to our try catch, but we can have a .catch on this chain. So that's basically the same thing. So in this case, we get an error. We can print out the error maybe. Let's see. Maybe we should return our objects. I'm just updating my error statement in case we run into some errors. So failed to get wine number. Okay, so in the error case, we'll return that. Okay, I think that should be good. Line, what did I do here? Oh, right. So since I'm returning an object, it's kind of confused. So we'll do that. All right, so I had to add curly braces here and a return statement because I was returning an object. So it didn't know that this was an object I want to return. It thought it was a function scope. So in this case, I added my function scope with return value. That looks good. All right, so again, this is using the .then syntax. So again, my fetch wine by ID returns a promise versus my fetch all wines returns the actual data. So again, just different behavior based on your the structure of your fetch calls. Okay, let's go to my wine page and take advantage of this. Here I'm going to use my wine API again. So import wine API from .api / wine. Where is that? API. Sorry, I need to go up 2 levels apparently. There it is. Wine API. All right, so we have our wine API here. So we're going to do something very similar to what we did in our fetch all wines. Is that correct? Let's see. Okay, so now that I'm thinking about this, just kind of contrasting against the directions. Technically, if we have all of our wines fetched on our homepage, we have the data already on our homepage. We could just pass down props to our wine detail page, and instead of fetching the wine detail again. So is that right? I guess, yeah, we have most of the details. We might have left off some in the, maybe the fetch all wines, like didn't have all the fields that the wine detail might have. So that's maybe a reason you need to call the fetch wine by ID separately. But the way we have it right now, I think we could technically pass on props to our wine detail page in our router, and that should work. But in this case, we want to just get an example of calling fetch. So we're just going to proceed with this. All right, so wine detail. This will receive props from the browser, or sorry, the router, and then we should use that to get our wine ID. So again, this can be very similar to our homepage, our wine list, where we do a use effect to get the wine detail and then render it to our page. So let's do that manually. Again, we might have this written up here. So I'm just gonna do it manual here. So wine detail page, let's add some exciting details about our wine. So we're gonna have a, let's see, H1. Oh, let's call a function actually. So this will be render wine details. Again, we're using functional components. Hopefully you guys can see the difference between functional and class. If not, again, if there's anything confusing about functional components, this is the time to ask. So please don't hesitate. So this is going to render my wine detail. So assuming we have some wine detail object, let's call it wine. Let's return some JSX. All right, so this will just be, let's make it a div. And this will be a bunch of H1s and H2s. Let's see. We have wine.name. Let's not show the ID. Let's have the H3. All right, so wine description, price. What else do we have? We have varietal. Let's just add that in here. Okay. Maybe I'm missing a field, but I don't really care at this point. I just want to show the detail. All right, so when we have our wine object, we're just going to render that with our render wine detail. Details. All right, so that's hooked up. We're going to actually need some state. So that's what it's complaining about in my output there. So let's create a state object of wine. So it's going to be const wine and then set wine. Then we're going to use state. And let's say our initial wine will be null. So if I want to check here, if not wine, return something that's all right. So my default state here is null for my wine, so that's why I'm checking it here. Set wine is not currently used because we need to get that data. All right, so this is where we use effects, just like we did in our homepage. So use effects. Stakes on the function and same dependency. So we want to do this only on the initial load, but that's not true because if we go to different pages, yeah. So if our wine changes, we need to do this use effects also. All right, so sorry, I'm just kind of thinking on the fly here, but this wine page, if you go to like a different wine detail, like go from wine 1 to wine 2, this component is not going to actually get destroyed and re-rendered or recreated. So in that case, the component stays, but your wine item will change when you go to a new page. And that's why I'm having wine here as a dependency item. Okay, so in here, we're going to do .then fetch. So we're going to do, let's see, say, let's do let data promise equals fetch. All right, before we do this, let's take a quick break. I think we've been going for a while. Yeah, let's take a quick, I think we got time. Let's take a quick 11-minute break, and then we'll finish this up. And then if we have time, we'll implement maybe that timer that we talked about so that we can refresh our data automatically. All right, so our goal here is to just make sure we make our fetch request for our wine. So yeah, close my parentheses here. So this use effect will actually call our wine API. So let's say data promise. So we have a wine API that has our fetch wine by ID. We're going to pass it some ID here. So the question is, what's that ID going to be? And I think that's coming from our router. So we can actually use our props. So let's see, let's wine ID equal. All right, so this is where I actually had to look this up because I don't always remember. Where's that coming from? Headline. Let's find this page. There it is. All right, so we need this.props. We're not using this because that's only for class base. So we have props match params one ID. Let me just copy that over. There we are. All right, and then we're going to pass that one ID into here. But again, the key thing to remember is that we're getting a promise back, not the actual data. So we need to chain a .then on here. And then this will be called once the JSON processing is done. So let's, again, go back to here. We're going to call our, make our fetch request. Once that's resolved, it's going to call this and return this JSON data that's returned from this parsing. So when we do a .then, we're actually taking this data and then using it. So that's in one page. So then let's say we have our data. We could do something with our data now. So in this case, our data should be a wine object. So we could just call set wine with our data. But we should probably have a catch here in case something else goes wrong. Who knows what can go wrong in the world. So let's just do console.error. Okay, so I guess we don't actually need this promise. Call that. Okay, so we're going to call that. Then we'll do this. And if there's an error, all right, I think that should be good. Wine ID, I'm not using because I misnamed it. Okay, so let's kind of think about this. So if the wine object changed, do we want to call this? Does that make sense? No, that wouldn't make sense because let's set wine here. So I think we want to actually change that. So the wine changing, we want to call this anytime the wine ID changes. Again, this is going to be coming from our router. So if the wine page changes, this component doesn't get destroyed. It still stays there. We just get a new ID passed down to it. And in that case, we want to get a new wine ID and then call our fetch for that new wine ID. All right, if this doesn't change, then we don't know how to get any new wine ID. So,
question, Encore.
Yep.
You said you're getting your wine ID from the homepage when that gets all the list of wines?
No. So it's coming from the router. So if you go back to our app.js, this ID is what's being passed by the router automatically. So yeah,
okay.
We'll be clicking on links from the homepage, and they'll be taken to this URL. And then whatever that ID is in the URL, the router will pass it through whatever weird list of props.match.params.wine ID. So that's where that wine
Okay.
ID.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for asking. Okay, so I think that should be mostly what I need, but as always, we need to test. So again, just pay attention to the different syntax. We're using a .then chaining here because that's the way we implemented our fetch wine by ID. Returning a promise in this case versus returning actual data in the async await case. Again, I prefer this because it just seems easier to me to have a function that returns data rather than dealing with the .thens. But this is something you'll definitely see, and just be familiar with either case of what async await is doing or what .then is doing from a promise. Okay. Any questions so far? So use effects. Well, this will say anytime that the ID changes, will update, or in addition to that, the very first render, I guess after the very first render, this will also fire. So again, this use effect is acting both as your component did mount and your component did update cases. But in this case, it's only when this prop change is when this is fired. All right, so we have our div that's returned. That should be rendered out. Let's actually test this. So I need a way to get to my wine details. So maybe let's add some hyperlinks to our homepage. I if you just click on these table rows, I'm actually not sure. Almost. Let's just add a anchor here. There might be a way to click on a table row. I've actually not experimented with that. I don't want to get into hot water right now, so this would be a link to the wine slash one ID here. Okay, so it's going to go there. We need to probably import link from router DOM. Okay, hopefully that looks good. All right, so these are links now. Kind of hard to read on a dark background. Apologies there. Maybe I should have gone to light background. What if we actually want to change the color of this? Should we go down this path? Let's try it. We have our app.css. Let's try this. I'm not sure if I run my CSS well, but let's do the link and then cover. I don't know what we want to make this. Make it a greenish color. Right. Does that actually work? No. All right, I'm not going to waste time on that, but ideally I should be able to override the Bootstrap CSS. Cover. Okay, let's just ignore that. Sorry for that. But okay, we're going to test out those links. All right, so Heroku is taking his time. Hopefully not too much longer. All right, so let me click on one of these links. Let's click on Capri Sun. All right, we're taking a wine/1. I don't see anything in the wine detail. It could be because Heroku is fetching something, or we got an error. Let's check our prep. All right, there we go. So we have this, but notice we have no data. That's not good. Server responded with a status of 404 not found. So it seems like our request is probably going to the wrong place. So let's take a look at that. Probably want a slash here because we have a slash there. So yeah, let's actually try to get there through our actual webpage. So we're at wines2. So this get request should work, right? We have wine/2. Maybe we need a trailing slash. Let's try that. Wine API. Maybe that slash the issue. Hopefully that's not the issue. That'd be kind of silly. Taking its time. Gosh, this is really slow. Okay, seems like I'm trying to go to wine/wine. So I have a double wines in there. Why did I have double wines? All right, so we have wines. So I guess that's my base. Okay, so I guess my URL is bad. Apologies there. So again, we don't have wines that are our homepage. So this is our homepage, and we just append the index on there. So let's quickly fix that. Go to my API. Apologies if you guys hear hammering in the background. Someone's doing some work nearby. All right, so we just want to get rid of this. That was my bad. Let's give this a try.
Is there anything you can do on core to make this load faster, or is it just Heroku's fault, essentially?
I'm going to say it's Heroku's fault. Again, I'm not too well versed in Heroku. I'm not sure there's like optimizations you can do. Maybe just find a different host, file host, yeah, I'm not sure, but it is excruciatingly slow. I don't think it's my internet because I've not had issues that I know of, but yeah, this is, again, making one fetch request.
You need the trailing slash. That's default required.
Gotcha. Thanks. And it looks like I forgot to have my init here also. So let's get that in here. So this will be in my fetch init. All right. One more time. Fingers crossed. Hopefully third time or fourth time, whatever time this is the charm. Come on, Heroku. All right, so while that's coming up, let's kind of scan what else we need to do. So we're doing our detail page. Hopefully we should get what we want. We have this. So what next thing we're going to want to do is the ability to add wine. So we're going to add an add wine page. We're going to add a new method to our API, and then a form to allow that to happen. So let's see. All right, there we go. Finally got our data. Formatting, not the best. Definitely can mess with React Bootstrap and CSS, whatever. But we got the data we wanted. So we have Capri Sun, price, everything we wanted in our detail. So that looks good. Any questions on our code here? So again, sorry, wrong page. Wine page. Again, a little different. We have this in here because if we want to go to a different page, let me go to page 2. That's actually going to trigger. Oops. That's actually going to trigger this update. And if we wanted to see this, we could add breakpoints and kind of see the updating. I'm going to maybe hold off on that, but if you guys want to see that, we definitely can. Basically, when I went to that new URL, this got triggered, and it's loading stuff, I believe. Load. There we go. So we got high C. Okay, so that was the wine detail page. Let's get to adding the add wine page. So here I'm going to do more copy and pasting rather than typing it all out to save some time. But let's add pages. So page. I'll call it wine add.js. I'll add wine page.js. All right, what do we need in there? A lot of stuff. Definitely don't want to write that out. So I'm going to copy all that from the curriculum page, but I'm going to convert this to a functional-based component. So notice this is a class-based component. So that shouldn't be too many steps. I'm going to change this to function. I don't need to extend from here, but I do need to add props. Okay. State. Again, we can't have an instance attribute in a functional component. Instead, we need to use state. So that's going to be const. Looks like we have a redirect. Set redirect. That's going to be use state. And the default is false. We don't need to use that here. So let's get rid of component and use state. I'm going to use effect also. So let's just add that in here. All right. So again, converted state into state in a functional component. So again, that's pretty straightforward. Get rid of that. This is a function. Let's see. E, so let's cross it out. Again, apologies for the hammering noise in the background if you guys can hear that. Okay, so we have our handle submit function, typo. Okay, so we converted that to a functional-based component. We need to return. So let's get rid of, let's see. Let's get rid of this. Do this all here. All right, I'll leave my tabbing as is. I've got 2 different tab stops. Can I just slide this in here? Okay, so if redirect is true, we want to redirect. So let's see. I think we should probably do some conditional rendering here. And to achieve that, I'm going to create a new function. So let's just do render add line. These tab stops are annoying me. Okay, and then add that in here. So if redirect, so again, this is our state. If redirect is true, we want to return that. And then if not, we are going to return all this stuff down here. All right, hopefully we've converted this successfully to a function-based component. Again, just a few steps. We just had to change our states. If we had any component life cycles in here, we'd want to change that to use effect, which I thought we'd do. Still might have to do. Don't want this anymore. All right, so hopefully that's all good and ready. Let's test it out. Okay, what else do we need? So we have that. We forgot to add our route. So let's add a route. Quick copy and paste operation. App.js. Add line. Include pages. Add line. Okay, that route is set up. I think the last thing we need to do is actually update our API. Right. So I'm going to go back to my async await functionality because I just prefer that. But we're going to create a new method called add line. So we'll take in probably some line objects. This method's going to be post. So let's actually clean this up a bit. Need a body here, so this would be R1. All right, so hopefully that's all we need here. Method post, body, content type, probably. That's right, double check that. Okay, let's see. All right, so we're adding this stuff. So content type, application JSON. I think we got that correct. Post 25. This should be a wine object. Okay. I think that's looks good. Fetch. Okay, so what data is this going to return? We gotta look at our API, but should probably return a success message. So we'll just go with that and check it. Okay, so let's export this. And let's use it in our add line page. So here, line API is included. I called this post wine. It's a little different. Post new wine. Wine object should be all this stuff. All right, let's actually test this out. So I don't want this up state, so let's actually fix that. We set redirect to true. Now let's quickly scan to make sure that we're not actually using this, because that's a contract for classes, so we don't need to find. Let's see, set redirect typo. All right, so do we see any more instances of this? I think we got rid of that. All right, I think that should take care of the class-based component to functional-based component. We hooked up our API to it. Response is not being used, so let's get rid of that. And okay, let's try this out. probably will get some error. That is one of them. What is the issue here? Code not show up. Unexpected token. Okay. Maybe add a div. Okay, that made it happy. All right, so use effect. I guess we're not using use effect right now. Ignore that warning. Let's give this a try. All right, so add wine page should be at / add wine. So let's try to navigate there, see if we actually can get there. Let's add wine. Okay, there we go. This form, again, not the best formatted item, but we could add some items here. So let's add something. Sunny tea, maybe orange, wine price. Let's give it $4.99. Wine description. All right, so let's try submitting it, but I lost my page now. Okay, let me just double check. So we included origin, so hopefully that should get us past what we need to. Base URL. So we need to make sure we're posting this to the correct place. So if you remember, for our Django Rust framework, we will post to our homepage. So our base URL should be sufficient. So if I go back to my wines page, we're allowed to post here. So this will post to the homepage for my API. So that's where I want to actually go, which is the base URL. Let's give this a try. I'm not actually sure if this will work. Submit. And I have no idea how long this will take. Let's maybe wait an hour or two and see if Django or Heroku gets back to us. So let's see if we got any errors. It's always good to check. Still waiting on something. Let's see if our backend got updated yet. Nope, still have these. All right, failed to load resource. Server responded with status 400, so bad request. What did we screw up? Let's look at our curriculum page. So this is going to wine/new. I'm going to the base URL because I'm using Django Rust framework. Otherwise, I'd go to whatever my custom path was. I think that's not the issue. Let's see, any more details? Post new wine was in add wine page. All right, so one thing, oh yeah, obviously. So here it's using the .then construct, but we are using async await, so that is, again, my bad. Let's get response equals post new wine await. So async. All right, so we're gonna await the response, and then we don't need .then. Again, that was my fault. I decided to change my code, but not appropriately. So if response.OK, again, this is something from the response object where if the status code is between 200 and 299, we should be OK. In this case, we want to set the redirect equal to true. And just to get some feedback, if response is not OK, let's display an alert. So let's say you failed. Succeeded. All right. So let's give this a run. So I changed this to use that. Await post new line should return. All right. So we don't care about the data return, so we'll return response in this case. Okay, let's give that a try. So I'm gonna go back to headline. Again, so sunny D, orange price would be 499 something. All right, let's give this a try, submit, and let's see what happens. Gosh, this is slow. You failed. All right, so core is that request. Why is that request? All right, so we're here. We're allowed to post here. Let's actually try something. So let's try from Postman. So Postman's here. I have our wine API, so we want to need wine. All right, let's try adding something here. D, whatever, orange. All right, let's see if Postman can get there. So I don't want to go to localhost. I actually want to go to my Heroku. So let's copy that. All right, cores anywhere, wines. So we'll just let me do it in my others. Set an origin here then. All right, let's give this a try and see if this actually works. So send.
I think your origin needed an I.
Oh no. Thank you. Let's save that. Okay, so we got a response. Origin was missing. So I guess that wasn't an issue. I'm not sure why this post would be going through. So we could maybe inspect our data. Maybe something's wrong that side. So this posted, it seemed like it went through. Let's actually try getting our detail. So one list. So it could just be a problem with our data. Missing requested header. All right. Origin will be Postman. Seems to be going way faster here than through my browser, but still kind of slow. There we go. Okay, so we got all three items. So it seems like our posting's working correctly. It's just something with our data or format in React isn't a problem. So let's quickly try to debug this. All right, so I have this. All right, I'm gonna try to debug this. So if I go to my debug,
a handy debug tool.
you got it. You know I love debugging. All right, so this is just going to be changing this to 3000 because that's where my React server is. Again, this is when I launch that JSON file. Hit save on that. Now I can go to run, start debugging. It's going to actually pop up a new Chrome window because this is actually attached to the debugger. And we'll go there. This will take another hour, so maybe you guys can eat lunch in the meantime. But yeah,
Could it be because your method, you have lowercase post? Because I think HTTP requests are case sensitive.
that definitely could be it. Let's go to my documentation. Thank you, Justin. Fetch API. fetch. There we go. Yeah, so they're using capitalized versions there. So, okay, that's, yeah, probably what my error was, hopefully. All right, so we got this, Sunny D got added. Let's go with Justin's suggestion. I think you might be right. So, what was that, my API file? That's when Windows open. Okay, so you're saying that should be post, right? Gotcha. Okay, let's give that one more try. So I'm gonna go to add wine. There we are. Wine name will be, what other juices are there? There's a lemonade. Lemon. Price would be $6.99. Sour. Okay, let's give that a try. All right, so we're actually debugging now, so we hit our breakpoint. Let's continue on there. So hopefully response will be okay when we hit that breakpoint. Wait a few moments. Sorry for the delays here. I don't know how to speed up Heroku, but maybe it's just having a bad day. All right, we got a response. Let's inspect it. Nope, we still got a bad request. That's not cool. So it looks like CORS is failing. So something about our CORS request is not kosher. Okay, apologies there. I failed again, demoralized. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up by allowing Django to receive CORS. So maybe spend the next 5 minutes doing that instead of debugging too much. But if we go through this process, we shouldn't have to go to that CORS anywhere URL. We should be able to go directly to our project. So basically what we're doing here is providing a list of URLs that we approve of that can make requests to our Django project. So we can add whatever we want to do here. So yeah, let's go about doing that. I'm a little curious why this is not working, but again, I don't want to waste too much of your time trying to figure that out. Ideally, it should be able to get to that URL. Something's just wrong here because Postman worked. So I'm doing something wrong here, and I can't pick it off right now. So let's proceed in our curriculum page. So this is where we're going to actually update the backend. So I think I have that project open somewhere, hopefully. Wine project. All right, so this is my back end. Is this it? Nope, still looks like a front end. What's that? Where are you? All right, maybe I just need to bring it up then. Sorry, I thought I had it open. Okay, I think this is my wine project. Yep. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go to my settings. Actually, let's go to my terminal first. All right, here I need to install something called pip install Django-CORS headers. I think I typed that correctly. All right, so it's going to install. This is something, again, that's required so that we can get around the CORS anywhere. So I'm going to do pip freeze and then write that up to requirements.txt. I'm afraid of making typos. All right, so those two steps are done. Now we want to go to our settings file. And again, we're back in our Django project. I don't know if you guys caught that switch, but I'm in my Django project here. So I'm going to go to my settings, which is in Wine API settings. And then we got to add a couple items here. So let's go to installed apps. So here we want to add something called CORS headers, all one word, without the U, of course, CORS headers. And then we're going to go to this area, the middleware. I don't think we've modified this before, but we're going to add something here. So the name of that is CORS headers.middleware.CORS middleware. All right, hopefully I typed that out correctly. It looks correct. And then one more item we're going to add. You can add this anywhere on the page, but I just like adding my new items at the bottom. So here I'm going to add something called CORS origin whitelist. And here I could add a bunch of items. So let's try adding HTTP or localhost. All right, so this should be whitelist. So this is basically saying that this URL should be able to access or make a request to our data. So let's try this out. So I'm going to actually push this to my Heroku site. So to do that, I'm going to do git push Heroku master.
You use regex or something to make it accept like any port from localhost, or even just?
I've not tried that, but I feel like that would make sense that you should be able to. Oh, I forgot to git add. Oh, my bad. Git add something. Git commit. Add a nice message. Added cores. Then I want to push it. Okay, so it's going to redeploy my Heroku project. In the meanwhile, let's look up Brendan's question / suggestion. Regex and cores whitelist. Regex on here. Oh, yeah, there you go. So there's, instead of doing what I did, what was it? Cores origin whitelist. You can do regexes, so that seems totally supported. Look at my curriculum page. Yeah, so they have a whitelist. So there's a few properties you can use. You can actually, sorry, I guess I should have shown that page. You can actually just add cores allowed origins. Is that all? No, sorry. There's a way you can just allow anyone to make a request to your Django site. Yeah, this one, sorry. Cores allow all origins. If you just add that, you don't have to specify who can make a request. So that might be just an easier way to get this up and running. But maybe you don't want anyone to make a request to your API. All right, it's still going, but hopefully it's almost done what it wants to do. In the meantime, let me go back to my front end. Here, I'm going to use a different base URL. So the whole goal of this was to not use this cores anywhere. So let's create the base URL like that. And save that. Still doing its thing. All right, there we go. So I think our backend should be up shortly. We could inspect on Heroku. All right, looks like it's been deployed. Let's actually try it out. So again, I changed my URL in my front end to be directly my project. All right, let's see if that's fine. Go back to my homepage. So I'm calling this from localhost 3000. If I did everything correctly, hopefully I didn't miss a step. So did this, did that, installed apps, middleware. Oh, I forgot one of these. Maybe that's free in my Django. Let's see. Settings. All right, maybe I need to put those up higher. I think that's what I was suggesting.
Ankur, in your whitelist, you have it as a HTTPS protocol. Is that going to affect it since localhost is just regular HTTP protocol?
Good question. Thought this should work because before, but all right, let me move this upwards because that's what the README said. Follow directions appropriately. All right, so I added that to the top. I'm going to redeploy this. All right, so you're saying this should be S?
I'm just wondering if that would affect it because localhost runs off just regular HTTP.
Worth a try. All right, so this is not going to actually have that change in there, but if that doesn't work, I'll resubmit it, but maybe that's going to take a while. So, all right, let's go 5 more minutes. I know we're running into lunchtime. If we're not up and running by then, we'll maybe reconvene, or I'll post a recorded fix. But again, definitely takes time to deploy the Heroku and also make requests to it. But let's see if we do it from Postman. So here, let's remove this. I guess my site's probably not up right now. Okay, that finished. Yeah, okay. Can I actually get to my site? That's not good. Looks like I screwed something up here. Let's see, Python manage.py run server. Did I mistype something? What? All right, looks like I mistyped something or screwed something up. All right, so yada, yada, yada.
So it says you're using Core's origin whitelist, which is, it says it works, but Core's allowed origins is the better way, or the new way to write it.
All right, chat cores allowed origins. I'm not able to run my server right now, so it looks like I screwed something up. Control C. Clear my virtual environments. All right, let's see. Uniform. Okay, looks like I'm running into errors. Apologies there. I will fix this up and post it with the recording. But the main point is you should be able to add a list of allowed requesters, and then that would circumvent the need to use your cores, the cores anywhere. So again, if you do it this way, it works, but that's not a permanent fix. So eventually you do want to be able to access your site directly. So that's something I need to figure out here. But I don't want to take up your lunchtime, so let's, yeah, well, again, I'll have this fixed and post the with recording. Any questions on the general concept here? So we have our backend on Heroku. Eventually, you can push up your front end to Heroku also. So basically, anyone on the web should be able to access your website, and it should be able to work.
Is that going to take twice as long?
Hopefully not. I think the web page, we could actually, yeah, I'm not going to do that right now. But yeah, you could get it up on Heroku much easier than the Django project. All you need to do is create a Heroku project and push this. You don't have to do anything with Unicorn or like any other installations for your React frontend. You can just push that to Heroku and it should be available. Okay. Any questions about anything? I guess that's pretty broad, but if not, I'll have this fixed and then we'll have it posted. So let me stop the recording here.